At 3:17 on a February morning, the power went out across nearly half of Stillwater Valley, Montana. The temperature was 9 degrees below zero. Snow was blowing sideways across the open pasture, erasing tire tracks almost as quickly as they were made. Electric fences went dead. Security cameras stopped transmitting. Water heaters shut off. Barn lights disappeared one property at a time until the valley looked the way it had looked 100 years earlier, dark, silent, and completely exposed. That was the same night the coyotes came down from the ridge. By sunrise, 3 sheep farms had reported losses. One rancher found 2 lambs dead near the back fence. Another found blood and wool scattered across the snow, but no carcass. A third had captured 37 seconds of grainy camera footage before the system went offline. The video showed 4 coyotes moving through the darkness in a loose line. Then the screen went black. But at the Bennett farm, where 286 ewes were wintering in a pasture bordered by cottonwoods and a frozen irrigation ditch, not one sheep was missing. The electric fence had failed there too. The cameras had gone down. The motion lights had never turned on. And yet, when Rachel Bennett walked the perimeter at first light, she found a wide circle of paw prints pressed into the snow around the flock. Inside that circle were hundreds of smaller hoof prints packed close together. Outside it were coyote tracks. They approached from the north, stopped 70 yards from the flock, shifted east, stopped again, and finally turned back toward the ridge. Between those 2 sets of tracks were the prints of one very large dog. His name was Boone, and 18 months earlier, nearly everyone in Stillwater Valley had told Rachel she was making a mistake. Rachel Bennett was 25 years old when she came back to the family ranch after finishing a degree in animal science at Montana State. She was the 4th generation of Bennett's to raise sheep on that ground, though her father, David, liked to remind her that a college degree did not make her the 5th generation until she survived at least 1 lambing season without calling him at 2 in the morning. Rachel had grown up doing the work. She could pull a lamb, repair woven wire, spot foot rot from 20 feet away, and tell by the sound of a ew's breathing whether something was wrong. She knew the pasture names, the irrigation schedule, and which gates would freeze shut first when the temperature dropped. But she also came home asking questions. Why had predator losses increased even after they installed better cameras? Why were they spending more each year on electric fencing while still finding tracks inside the perimeter? Why did every part of their protection system depend on power, cellular service, batteries, or someone being awake at the exact right moment? Her father had answers. The coyotes were getting bolder. The valley had more development. Wildlife routes were changing. The flock had grown. And nothing worked perfectly. All of that was true. But Rachel kept returning to one question. What happens after the camera sees something? David would say it sends an alert. And then what? Then one of us goes out there. What if it's 3 in the morning? Then one of us goes out there at 3 in the morning. What if the road is buried? We take the truck. What if the truck won't start? At that point, her father would usually look at her the way fathers look at adult daughters who have returned from college with too many questions and not enough patience for inherited answers. Then one afternoon in August, Rachel drove 6 hours west and came back with an 8-week-old Great Pyrenees puppy riding in a crate behind the cab. He was mostly white, with gray markings around one ear and paws that seemed too large for the rest of him. David stood beside the truck and stared through the crate door. What is that? A livestock guardian. It looks like a polar bear with bad coordination. He's 8 weeks old. He's chewing the crate. He's nervous. He's eating the crate, Rachel. Rachel opened the door, and the puppy climbed halfway out, changed his mind, backed up, stepped in his water bowl, and sat down in it. David folded his arms. How much did you pay for him? Rachel told him. Her father closed his eyes for a moment. Then he asked the question she had been waiting for. Why? Rachel explained that Boone would not be trained like a herding dog. He would not gather sheep on command. He would not wait beside a gate for a whistle. His job would not be to move the flock. His job would be to live with it. He would sleep near the sheep, eat near the sheep, learn their movement, recognize their sounds, and treat the pasture as his territory. By the time he matured, he would patrol the boundaries, bark at unfamiliar animals, place himself between the flock and a threat, and make the pasture feel occupied, even when no person was there. David looked at the puppy, who had started licking muddy water off his own front leg. That thing is going to protect 300 sheep? Not today. When? When he grows up. So for a year, we feed him while he does nothing? For a year, we raise him correctly so he knows what his job is. David looked at Rachel. Then he looked at Boone. Boone sneezed. Her father said, "This is your project." Rachel smiled. "That's fine. And if he chases sheep, I handle it. If he digs out, I handle it. If he wanders onto Morrison's place, I handle it. If he eats one of my boots?" Rachel looked down at Boone. Boone was already chewing David's bootlace. "I'll handle that too." The first person outside the family to hear about Boone was Hank Morrison. Hank owned the neighboring cattle ranch and leased 200 acres of winter grazing to 3 different sheep operators. He was 63 years old, had worked livestock his entire life, and carried the kind of confidence that comes from solving a great many real problems with his own hands. He was not foolish. He was not cruel. And he was not a man who changed his mind simply because someone younger than his youngest child had printed out a study. Rachel met him at the feed store 2 weeks after bringing Boone home. The puppy was in the bed of her truck inside a covered kennel. Rachel was buying mineral blocks when Hank noticed the bag of large breed puppy food on her cart. "What are you feeding?" he asked. "Great Pyrenees." Hank leaned one elbow on the counter. "You get a pet?" "Livestock guardian." He smiled, but not kindly. "A sheepdog?" "Guardian dog." "Same thing." "No. A herding dog moves sheep. A guardian stays with them." Hank nodded slowly, as though Rachel had just made a distinction too small to matter. "My grandfather kept dogs with sheep," he said. "They wandered, barked all night, got into trash, cost money." "Was your grandfather using electric fence?" "No." "Cameras?" "No." "Cell alerts?" Hank looked at her. "What's your point?" "My point is, I'm not replacing the fence or the cameras. I'm adding something that can respond after they detect a threat." Hank laughed. It was not a vicious laugh. It was the laugh of a man hearing an old idea presented as though it had just been invented. "We have better tools now," he said. "Better at what?" "Keeping predators out." Rachel glanced through the store window toward his truck. "You lost 4 lambs last spring." The smile left his face. "Everybody loses some." "I know. Then what are we arguing about?" "We're not arguing. You brought up my lambs. You brought up better tools." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Hank tapped the counter with 2 fingers. "Your dog gets loose on my place. I'll call you once." Rachel nodded. "That's fair." She paid for the feed and left. But on the drive home, Hank's words stayed with her. "We have better tools now." He was right. Modern agricultural security systems were better in almost every measurable way than the tools available to the ranchers who had worked that valley 50 years earlier. Electric fencing could contain livestock across large areas with fewer posts and less wire. Solar chargers could maintain voltage far from a barn. Motion cameras could watch a pasture all night. Thermal optics could detect animals in darkness. Cellular alerts could reach a rancher miles away. All of it was useful. Rachel believed in all of it. The problem was not that those systems were bad. The problem was that people had started asking them to do jobs they had never been designed to do. A fence creates a boundary. A camera creates information. A light creates visibility. An alert creates awareness. None of those things makes a decision. None of them changes position. None of them walks toward a sound in the dark. Boone could, but only if Rachel raised him correctly. That was the part people did not see. They saw a white puppy lying beside the water trough and assumed he was sleeping. They did not see Rachel sitting quietly in the pasture, so he would learn that calm behavior around sheep was normal. They did not see her correcting him when puppy play became too rough. They did not see her moving him from a small group of steady older ewes to a larger paddock, then gradually giving him more space as his judgment improved. At 4 months old, Boone chased a lamb for 11 seconds. Rachel stopped him immediately. At 5 months, he dug under a gate and spent an afternoon asleep under the hay wagon. At 7 months, he barked at a plastic feed sack for nearly 20 minutes. At 9 months, he started walking the inside fence line every evening without being taught. At 10 months, a stray dog approached the lower pasture. Boone saw it before Rachel did. He stood up, moved in front of the flock, and barked. The sound was deep enough that Rachel felt it in her chest. The stray stopped. Boone advanced perhaps 20 yards, not running, not chasing, simply closing the distance. The stray turned around. That evening, Rachel told her father what had happened. David kept working on a broken gate latch while she spoke. When she finished, he said, "You sure the dog wasn't just barking because he likes barking?" "I'm sure. He does like barking. He also knew that dog didn't belong there." David tightened the last bolt. Then he glanced toward the pasture, where Boone was lying among the ewes. "How much food is he eating now?" "About 5 cups a day." Her father shook his head, but he was smiling. By the time Boone was 18 months old, he weighed 116 pounds. His coat had thickened. His movements had slowed. The clumsy puppy had become a patient, deliberate animal that seemed to notice everything without appearing excited by much of anything. He slept through afternoons. At night he worked. Rachel sometimes watched him through the thermal camera. He would lie still for 20 minutes, lift his head, listen, and then walk the perimeter. He stopped at the same high points each time. He checked the ditch, he moved along the cottonwoods, he returned to the flock. The sheep changed too. When Boone barked from one side of the pasture, the ewes moved away from that side without panicking. When something disturbed them, younger animals gathered near him. He was not controlling them in the way a herding dog would. He was influencing the shape of the flock by changing where safety seemed to be. Then February came. The forecast called for wind, heavy snow, and dangerous cold. Nothing about it seemed unusual for Montana until the front moved faster than expected and temperatures dropped nearly 20 degrees in 3 hours. By midnight, drifting snow had covered the lower county road. At 1:42 in the morning, ice brought down a power line near the river. At 2:08, the Bennett farm lost electricity. The backup generator started automatically, ran for 12 minutes, and shut down after a fuel line problem. David tried to restart it. Rachel checked the barn. The heat lamps were out, but the lambing shed was not yet in use. The main concern was water. The heated troughs would begin freezing within hours. Then Rachel's phone buzzed. Motion detected. North pasture. She opened the camera app. The image loaded slowly. Snow. A fence post. Nothing else. Then another alert arrived. Motion detected. North pasture. She tapped it. This time the app displayed a gray screen and a loading symbol. The cellular relay had gone offline. David came into the kitchen wearing insulated coveralls. Generator's not starting. I'm going to check the flock. You won't get the truck through the lower drift. I'll take the snowmobile. In this wind? Rachel looked toward the dark window. From inside the house, they could hear almost nothing but weather. Then, beneath the wind, came one deep bark. A pause. Another bark. Then three in quick succession. Rachel was already pulling on her coat. The snowmobile made it halfway to the north pasture before the engine began sputtering. Rachel stopped near the equipment shed and continued on foot with a flashlight. The beam barely reached 20 feet. Snow struck her face hard enough to make her turn her head. The pasture fence appeared suddenly out of the darkness. The wire was slack in one section where snow had pushed a branch across it. There was no voltage. Rachel climbed over. She could hear the sheep before she could see them, a dense, restless sound of hooves and breath. Then Boone barked again. He was somewhere ahead of the flock. Rachel moved toward the sound until her flashlight caught the backs of the ewes. They had gathered tightly near a low rise, all facing inward. Boone was 40 yards north of them. He stood broadside to the flock, facing the cottonwoods. Rachel swept the light beyond him. At first she saw nothing. Then two eyes reflected back. Another pair appeared farther left. Then another. Coyotes. Rachel could not tell how many. 3, perhaps 4. They were not charging. Coyotes rarely behave the way people imagine predators behave. They test. They circle. They look for separation, confusion, weakness, and opportunity. That night, the dead fence was an opportunity. The storm was an opportunity. A flock without a person nearby was an opportunity. But Boone had changed the calculation. He barked and moved forward. The coyotes shifted back. He stopped. They stopped. For several seconds, nothing moved except the snow. Then one coyote angled toward the ditch. Boone turned with it, maintaining his position between the animal and the flock. Another moved right. Boone backed toward the sheep, forcing both coyotes into his field of view. Rachel stood behind the flock and watched him make decisions no camera could make. He did not rush blindly. He did not abandon the sheep to chase one animal. He did not wait for instruction. He kept the flock behind him and the threat in front of him. Then he barked again. The nearest coyote turned first. The others followed. Within seconds, the flashlight showed nothing but blowing snow and cottonwood trunks. Boone remained standing. Rachel called his name. He looked back once, but did not come to her. He walked the northern edge of the pasture, stopped where the coyotes had been, and barked into the darkness for another 5 minutes. Only then did he return to the flock. Rachel knelt beside him and put one hand against his shoulder. Snow had gathered across his back. His breathing was steady. He looked at her briefly, then turned his head toward the trees again. The power remained out until late the next afternoon. By then, word had begun moving through the valley. The Carsons had lost 2 lambs. The Ortega place had lost 1 ewe and could not find another. Hank Morrison had found blood near his leased sheep pasture and tracks crossing a section of fence where the charger had failed. At the Bennett farm, every animal was accounted for. David and Rachel spent the morning thawing trough valves and clearing snow. Neither said much about the night until they reached the north fence. There, the tracks told the story more clearly than Rachel could. Coyote prints approached from 3 directions. Boone's prints crossed each path. They followed the fence, moved between the predators and the flock, and formed a wide, uneven ring around the sheep. David stood with his hands in his coat pockets. How many were there? At least 3. You see them? Yes. What did Boone do? His job. David looked toward the dog. Boone was asleep beside a hay feeder, his head resting against the leg of an ewe. For a long moment, Rachel's father said nothing. Then he asked, "You feed him yet?" "Not yet." David started walking toward the barn. "I'll do it." That afternoon, Hank Morrison called. He did not begin with an apology. Men like Hank rarely do. He began with a practical question. "Your fence go down last night?" "Yes." "For how long?" "Most of the night." "You lose anything?" "No." There was a pause. "The dog out there?" "Yes." Another pause. "I lost 3. Rachel leaned against the kitchen counter. "I'm sorry." Tracks came in from the ridge. "Same here. My cameras quit." "So did ours." Hank breathed into the phone. Then he said, "You think that dog stopped them?" "I watched him do it." The line stayed quiet. Finally, Hank asked, "You know anyone raising another one?" That question changed more than his opinion. It changed the conversation across the valley. Rachel did not tell people that every ranch needed a Great Pyrenees. She did not claim a livestock guardian was a perfect solution. Some dogs wandered. Some were placed poorly. Some were not raised with stock correctly. Some operations did not have the fencing, acreage, neighboring conditions, or management time to use them responsibly. She said exactly what she had said from the beginning. A guardian dog was not a replacement for good fencing. It was not a replacement for cameras. It was not a replacement for human management. It was another layer, a living layer, one that could detect a threat, interpret it, change position, influence the flock, and respond even when the power was out. Rachel began keeping records. During the 12 months before Boone matured, the Bennett farm had documented 6 predator incidents and lost 9 sheep or lambs. During the first 12 months after he began working full-time with the flock, they documented 8 predator approaches. They lost 1 lamb, and that loss occurred in a separate paddock where Boone had not been present. The number that interested Rachel was not simply the reduction in losses. It was the increase in detected approaches. Predators had not disappeared. The pressure had not gone away. The farm had simply become harder to exploit. That spring, the county extension office invited Rachel to speak at a small livestock meeting. She was given 15 minutes between a presentation on mineral deficiencies and a demonstration of a new portable fencing system. Hank sat in the 3rd row. Rachel showed photographs of tracks from the night of the outage. She explained the difference between a herding dog and a livestock guardian. She talked about bonding, maturity, fencing, feeding, roaming risk, and the time required to raise a reliable working animal. Then she showed 2 photographs side by side. The first showed a camera mounted on a fence post. The second showed Boone standing among the flock. "The camera and the dog are both valuable," she said, "but they do different things. The camera tells me something entered the pasture. The dog tells the thing that entered the pasture that the pasture is occupied." No one laughed. After the meeting, 4 ranchers stayed to ask questions. Hank waited until the others had finished. Then he walked over with his hands in his jacket pockets. "I talked to a breeder near Livingston," he said. Rachel nodded. "Good breeder? That's what I'm trying to figure out. You want me to look at the operation with you?" Hank looked toward the door. "I didn't say I needed help." "Of course not." "I said you could come along." Rachel smiled. "When?" "Tuesday." "What time?" 6. "In the morning?" Hank gave her a look. "You planning to buy a working dog at noon?" Rachel went with him. He chose a female pup from working parents and named her Pearl. For the first 6 months, Pearl dug under gates, barked at cattle, stole gloves, and ignored Hank whenever he called her. Twice he told Rachel the dog was defective. Twice Rachel reminded him that Pearl was a puppy. At 14 months, Pearl interrupted her first coyote approach. Hank called Rachel the next morning. This time, He did not make her ask. "She worked," he said. "I know. You don't know. You weren't here. I know because you called." Hank was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. This laugh was different. By the following winter, 7 livestock operations in Stillwater Valley were using guardian dogs as part of their predator management plans, not instead of modern systems. Alongside them, they improved fencing around roads and neighboring properties. They added identification collars. They coordinated with one another when moving animals. They shared information about roaming, health, feeding, and young dog behavior. The technology did not disappear. The valley had more cameras than before, better chargers, better alerts, better mapping. But people stopped confusing awareness with action. 3 years after the night the power failed, another storm crossed Stillwater Valley. The electricity stayed on this time. The fence chargers worked. The cameras transmitted every image. At 2:11 in the morning, Rachel's phone displayed an alert from the north pasture. She opened the live feed. A coyote stood near the cottonwoods. Boone was already moving toward it. He was older now, slower. His coat looked almost silver in the infrared image. Behind him walked a younger guardian named June, learning the perimeter the way Boone had once learned it. The coyote watched them approach. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees. Rachel set the phone down without leaving her bed. The camera had seen the danger. The fence had marked the boundary. But Boone and June were the parts of the system that stood up and walked toward it. People had once laughed because Rachel put a dog with the sheep. Then the storm came. The power failed. The fence went dead. The cameras went dark. And the oldest part of the system became the only part still watching.